as the United States warns tensions between Israel and Hezbollah are at breaking point.
Joining us now is Executive Council of Australian Jury CEO Alex Ryvchin. Before we get to talking about Hezbollah, Alex, just want to get your thoughts on the PM suspending Fatima Payman this afternoon.
Well, Senator Payman's position on Israel, on Hamas and the conflict is clearly out of step with that of the government. The fact that she chose to side with the Greens, who have been directly involved in inciting so much of the vandalism of the offices of her very colleagues and so much of the disorder and chaos on university campuses and in wider society. The fact that Senator Payman could no longer adhere to the Labor Party position of supporting a negotiated two-state solution, it's thoroughly disappointing. And clearly, to maintain discipline, to maintain clarity as to what the government's position on the conflict is, she had to be disciplined.
Now, we've just been talking earlier about the US presidential debate. Is it coincidence, do you think, that in the immediate aftermath of Joe Biden's horrible performance, there's now far more chatter about the northern border of Israel and Hezbollah ramping up their attacks on Israel? They've been lobbing missiles over there for quite some time, but the whole thing looks like really escalating in the near future.
Well, Hezbollah and their patrons in Tehran closely monitor international reactions and the strength of the international system. And they see a fundamental weakness right now, not only in the US presidency, but in the international reaction to the October 7 atrocities and Israel's subsequent war. And had the international community backed Israel, supported its right to defend its citizens, to rescue its hostages and dismantle Hamas, we wouldn't be in this situation. But instead, Hezbollah has seen an international community divided. They've seen an international community heap pressure on Israel through the ICC and the ICJ and the UN and trying to isolate them from FIFA and Eurovision. And they realize that they can prosecute a war against Israel, draw them into a bloody long war, which will surpass anything that's happening in Gaza now, and still have the favor of the international community, or at least divide the international community. So leadership is paramount, and the weakness we're seeing in the international community right now, the moral fog, is what's contributing to this war.
Yeah, you're right. There's been such a moral fog by the US, even here in Australia. Now, look, Alex, Sydney University has practically been bent over by pro-Palestine protesters after entering into an agreement now with the Sydney University Muslim Students Association, giving it a place in its working group to review the university's investments. How do you feel about such an arrangement like this?
I mean, this is unbelievable. When we talk about weak leadership, I mean, this is the epitome of that. And for it to happen here at one of our most esteemed institutions, it's utterly scandalous and pathetic. And you have to bear in mind that this encampment was originally formed of two components. You had the hard left and you had the Islamists linked to Hizb ut-Tahrir. The hard left have wandered off, and so the university has now negotiated with the most extreme of the extreme. They've capitulated. They've allowed them into a working group which will review the university's investments and research arrangements, which is extraordinary. And what message does this send to other students, other would-be extremist groups, to Jewish students and academics on campus? It is the most dire situation. And the fact that the university thinks they've actually handled this well, I think says it all.
Yeah, Alex, I want to ask you about a music festival. Just before we get onto that, I was talking to a Jewish family during the week, and they were saying numbers of Jewish families are now saying they will not send their kids to Sydney University. And in fact, some are opting to send their children to Israel to do university because they just don't trust Western universities anymore.
Well, that's a tragedy, you know, but this is the state of affairs that has been allowed to occur in the United States and here as well. And when you have pathetic leadership of the sort that we've seen at Sydney University, when you have greater regard paid to the so-called rights of these extremists who break the law and make a mockery of the universities, then the students and academics who just want to teach and learn and go about their lives, this is what's going to happen. And I hear on a near daily basis from Jewish students and academics at Sydney Uni and other campuses who don't feel safe, who've been harassed, who've been spat upon, who've had swastikas put into their private possessions. And of course, they're going to consider their options.
I was shocked to see images from the Glastonbury Music Festival over the weekend where crowds of young people were waving flags, but not in solidarity with Israeli young people who were raped and murdered at a similar festival, but in solidarity with the attackers. What on earth is going on?
Well, it's unbelievable. I mean, this festival has a long tradition of hard left ideology. They lionized Jeremy Corbyn a few years ago. But as you point out there, James, this is a music festival. And 8 months ago, 364 Israelis that look and live their lives just like those at Glastonbury today were brutally slaughtered at a festival in Israel. 40 more were dragged off into captivity. And the fact that these people at Glastonbury, the organisers and the patrons and those attending, looked upon those scenes and feel a greater love and solidarity for the perpetrators than the victims, it's unbelievable. And, you know, David Baddiel, the author, he wrote a book about Jews Don't Count, and this is the greatest epitome of that. The fact that the one point of distinction between those that were massacred at Nova and those at Glastonbury is that they're Jewish. And because of that, no one cares for their fate.
The other thing is, Alex, that events like this, and we've seen it at similar events or similar situations in Australia, they're now becoming so highly politicised and so highly skewed towards this anti-Israel sentiment. It's impossible now to go to an event and you don't get this pro-Palestine statement in your face. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's a horrible thing, and we're seeing it in Australia at theatres and festivals. And there's been this long shift where institutions, even human rights organisations that used to actually stand up for universal principles, have been hollowed out, hijacked and turned against those who, in many cases, founded these organisations. And they have a deeply anti-Western, anti-liberal, in many cases anti-Jewish ideology. And ultimately what happens in these cases is that they themselves lose. People realise what they've become. They turn away from it. The only people that maintain any support for them are the same fringes that now dominate them. And so ultimately they've got a choice to make. Do they want to do what they were set up for, to provide culture and entertainment and contribute to the theatre and great initiatives such as this? Or do they want to become tools of a political war?
Yeah, very well said, Alex Ryvchin. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much.